Hey, it's your friendly neighborhood Spider-Man here, and I'm swinging by the Geekcast Radio Network.
This is Kevin Conroy, and I am the goddamn Batman.
You've just jumped inside the Pull Bag. Join TFG1 Mike and the rest of the comic crew here at the GCRN as they make their great escape into comics. From DC, Marvel, and Image to IDW, Boom Studios, and Zenescope, we have everything right here. We cover things like Transformers, He-Man, superheroes, TMNT, and Radiant Black. Yeah, we have all that and so much more. It's all inside the Pull Bag here on the Geekcast Radio Network. So, without further ado, it's time to talk about the comics we're reading right now, here inside the Pull Bag.
Hello and welcome to The Pull Bag, only on the Geekcast Radio Network. This is episode 492. We are on our way to 500 episodes of this podcast. I never thought I'd ever have a podcast that was 500 episodes, hell, 100 episodes. I'm, of course, TFG1 Mike. Joining me tonight for his comic reading origins is Dan from HudsonRiverRadio.com's Rock Nerd Radio. Hello, sir.
Hey, Mike, how you doing, man?
I'm okay. How are you?
Doing all right, thank you. Having a busy day, but happy to be able to record with you.
Absolutely. So I have followed you on Twitter. You followed me on Twitter. I don't remember how we. It was probably just the purple in the logo that the whole reason, like why I even followed you, because black and purple, the two best colors ever. And yeah, so we are here to talk about comics. 25 questions, all about how you got into or out of reading comics. Did you grow up reading comics, and at what age do you first remember reading or noticing comics?
That's a great question. I've been reading comics since I could read. Something that I haven't told a lot of people, but I don't have a problem sharing it, is that I'm actually dyslexic. And reading for me was very difficult as a kid. So my mom would try to get me, my mom was an educator, and she would try to get me to read stuff and be into things. And I was struggling. I just wasn't into it. So around when I was in first grade, the X-Men cartoon aired on Fox Kids, and I was all about X-Men and, superheroes from then on out. So my mom would just kind of be like, all right, you're going to read comic books. If that's going to get you to read, then so be it. And so since I learned to read, I've been reading comics, and it's what kept me interested in reading pretty much.
That is very, very awesome. I am slightly older than you, and I started with like Transformers storybooks. So it's around here somewhere, but I have the, I assume it was Marvel Books, because that's who had the Transformers visual reading thing back in those days. It's Transformers the Movie, Wheelie, the Wild Boy of Quintesson. And it's a mix of it. It's one of those books where it's a mix of images and like maybe one paragraph or two paragraphs per page. So yeah, that's and then obviously comics came way, way later for me. But yeah, no, that's awesome. That is great that comics helped you get to the point where you needed to be.
Yeah, and speaking of those Transformer books, I had a Transformer Choose Your Adventure book. So my mom would throw that at me pretty often, but the only problem was I'd get tired of reading the same beginning each and every time.
Yeah. Optimus Prime needs to go this way, or he needs to go this way. Which way do you... Whatever way has him in front of the gun first. Megatron pulled that trigger. Hot Rod did not pull that trigger. So anyway, it's a whole thing with me. As a kid, well, you just said your mom, but basically, was there a parent, friend, whomever said, here, kid, read this comic, go away, you bother me?
It was both my parents trying to get me to read, and then I have two older brothers who, your older brothers will hand stuff down after a while once they kind of feel they're too old for it or they get tired of it. So after a while, my brothers would just be like, here, read this issue of Spider-Man, go away. Like that was it. They wanted to watch TV in their room. They wanted me to get out of their room. So they'd hand me a comic and that was that. So I think inadvertently my family steered me into this direction. I don't think they ever thought that I'd be in my late 30s podcasting about comic books and still reading them and collecting memorabilia and things like that.
Yeah, it's one hell of a hobby, isn't it?
Oh, yeah.
When you were a kid, which characters were your favorites?
Well, going back to what I said, I think a lot of it had, were the X-Men because of the X-Men animated TV show. Wolverine I gravitated to because, they made him like the super cool dude that everybody, wanted to like in that show. And, they pushed him that way in the comics. We also had a video rental place. I don't know if you remember the Marvel Comics video library. And they always had like a Spider-Man episode at the end of them. So I was big into Spider-Man too. I might watch an episode about Thor or the Hulk, but then I'd see an episode every time about Spider-Man. So I really got into Spider-Man as a kid too.
Yeah, no, I do not remember those ones. I remember other video type things, but I do not remember those. Age-old question, DC or Marvel?
Man, that's a great question. And I was just featured on a different podcast where we were discussing this. As a kid, I was more into Marvel simply because that's what I was reading. That's what I was handed.
Yep.
And the X-Men were everywhere. But at the same time, you had things like Batman, the animated series that was on TV, and eventually the Superman cartoon that Warner Brothers put out. So it wasn't an aversion to DC Comics. It was just that I was just reading Marvel. And then when I hit college, a really good friend of mine, I'm still friends with him to this day. He was like, dude, I think you would like, Green Lantern, or I think you would like The Flash. And I started reading those titles just kind of on a whim. So I respect both companies, but definitely as a kid, it was straight up Marvel. How about you? Did you have a preference growing up?
I didn't, because I was more of a cartoon kid than a comics kid. I didn't do... Like, I remember going out to Walden Books to see if I could find a comic version of whichever episode of Spider-Man the Animated Series was on at the time. But, like, I think the only thing I remember about comics in the 90s as a teenager is what I just reacquired in the last month or so. And I'll talk about that in a minute. But what I remember is one really, really dark, and it was not Dark Knight Returns. It was not. It was not the traditional. It wasn't Year One. It was some Batman story, and no one has ever been able to tell me what this is because I don't know what it was. But it was like this super dark Batman story, and I know it was not Dark Knight Returns, like I said, and yeah, I just gravitated more towards the cartoons. And the thing that I reacquired, because again, back then, in those days, you had to go to Walden Books or whatever other bookstore or some grocery store book section might have comics. DC versus Marvel, that 4-issue 90s miniseries. Oh, I just reacquired the trade, and oh god, my head hurts. And not because of the trade itself, but reacquiring the trade, because this trade is not... The trade paperback of those 4 issues is everything that people say about old book. Like, oh, do you smell old books? Yes, everybody takes a whiff of an old book. I mean, that's like asking an addict if they light up once a day. Don't do drugs, kids. It's just one of those things. And I got this thing in the mail the other day, and I looked through it, and I forgot. Because you look at comic books today and look at the paper that they use now versus what they used almost 30 years ago. That paper it's just like a book. It's not technically book stock, but you know what I mean. Like, it's literally like it's old book thing, and I was like, oh god, and I forgot that because, and I didn't know trade paperbacks back then, and most trades nowadays will do some sort of bio or some sort of whatever. Obviously, this is something special because heaven forbid DC and Marvel ever do anything together. But, you have bios for all the creators. You have bios for all the characters in the back of the book. You have all 4 of the main covers in the back of the book. And I'm just like, holy crap. So we're going to cover that on this podcast at some point. I don't know when, and I don't know who, if I'll be doing it. But, I'm going to have to read that. And I know technically The two Funko Pops I have sitting on top of this book, one of them was nowhere near DC at the time, but because I can't find any of my other Batman ones, I have 94 Spider-Man Funko Pop and Batman Beyond Funko Pop sitting on top of DC versus Marvel.
Real quick aside to that DC versus Marvel thing, did you ever hear what was supposed to be the outcome of that?
No, I just know what's in the book.
So one of the outcomes that was proposed was that Green Lantern was going to go to Marvel. Like they were going to trade two heroes. And Green Lantern would have landed in Marvel, and Daredevil would have landed in Gotham as like a, I don't want to say an apprentice to Batman, but an ally to Batman. And the idea was nixed in the in the 11th hour, but that was one of the ways that book was supposed to end.
Thank God it never did that. All right, so you mentioned Green Lantern and the Flash are a couple of your favorite characters. We'll talk more about characters later, but which Green Lantern and which Flash?
Oh man, that is a loaded question. I really like Kyle Rayner as Green Lantern. A lot of people say, "Oh, well, that's because when you grew up." But as I said, I didn't really read Green Lantern until I was in college, and that was when Jeff Johns took back over, and he did like Darkest Night and things like that, and Sinestro Corps War. So I do like Hal, but for whatever reason, I just really like Kyle. I loved the way that they played off that he was an artist, so his constructs were very artsy, for lack of a better word. I always enjoyed that. And with Flash, it was always Barry. Nothing against Wally, but Barry was my go-to.
Really?
Yeah.
Yeah, for me, it's always been John first, then Kyle.
Okay.
I would probably, even though I'm not a huge fan, I don't know that much about him, I'd probably take, like, Hal would be dead last. You put everybody in the I would pick the Guardians before I would pick Hal Jordan.
Okay.
And then Flash, it's all about Lex Luthor as the Flash Justice League cartoon. It's all about Michael Rosenbaum's The Flash. Yep.
That body swap episode, I love that episode, man.
Oh, great brain robbery. That was amazing.
What's your name? Tell me the plan. And then he takes, I love the part, Luthor takes off the Flash's mask. He goes, finally, I know who the Flash is. He lifts up, no idea who this is. He just puts it back down.
Because that's the thing. Like, I'm sure in the comics we all knew, for those of us reading comics at that time in 2000, Just League 2001, 2006, 2001, 2006, I'm sure we all knew Wally had red hair, but
yes,
the fact that you have I think it's A Better World Part 2, Bruce Wayne, Wally West, Clark Kent, the whole reveal, and Wally says, fine, and he pulls his cowl off, and Wonder Woman's like, red hair, it suits you. Like, nobody knew, nobody really cared, honestly, when it came to the cartoon, what color hair Wally was going to have, but it was just like,
right.
Hey, let's just keep it the way it's supposed to be kind of thing.
Yeah.
So besides DC and Marvel, what other publishers do you enjoy reading?
That's a good question, and I think if you asked me this 10 years ago, all I would be able to tell you was IDW. I really love their Transformers stuff. But since then, and more recently in the past 2-3 years, I've been just diving into other stuff. Bad Idea was around, it was here, and then it was gone, maybe? So I've been reading some of the Bad Idea titles. I've been reading some stuff from Image. I've been reading some, just now it's more a follow writers around. So it's not necessarily just a company. Donny Cates was doing crossover, so I've been reading that. Jeff Johns did Geiger, so I was reading that. Just because I like the writers, not so much that, I'm following a character or a company anymore. So,
well, IDW for 17 years now or so has been the company that was Mr. and or Ms. franchise property, or it was
Right.
they had everything. They had Joe, they had Transformers, they had Mask for a while, they had
Hell, they had My Little Pony.
they had My Little Pony, they had Back to the Future, they any 80s property, or sometimes even 90s properties you can think of, they've had them at one point or another. And
Yeah.
the direction that they're going, I don't know. Like, generally, I don't follow companies either. I'm with you. I follow creators. But with IDW back then, like when I first started back in 2013, when this podcast started, I was told two things. You can start at the death of Optimus Prime, and then you can either go to More Than Meets the Eye or Robots in Disguise, or you can read them both. Well, we've covered every single version of the IDW 2.0 series that Barber and Roberts have done on this podcast, and yeah, they were the franchise company. Image has got some great stuff. I was never in on Image way back in the day, but again, following a creator, I still wish Kyle Higgins got to tell his Nightwing story, and I still wish Dan
Yeah.
I'm sorry, you share. Yeah.
Didio?
I always call him, and I've been doing this for almost 9.5, 10. It's not Didio. It's Dan Dildo is what it is, because he always wanted to kill Nightwing, always wanted to kill Dick Grayson. I'm like, dude, let it go. Like, seriously, just let the. So I followed Kyle, and Kyle went to various companies and did various things. He's done some creator-owned stuff, and like he's got his series Cowl, which is based on characters from his short film. He's got Radiant Black now is the new hotness over there at Image, and just that whole massive verse that Image is starting, and it's just really, really fun. But I don't want to just, the whole point, question 4 and 5 is, let's have a DC Marvel discussion, and oh, by the way, what are the others that you do, kind of thing, because I don't want to just mention DC and Marvel, because this show is not just DC and Marvel. This show is everything, so we follow everything, sort of, almost, kind of.
And, it's also interesting, too, because I feel like, and I'm not trying to make anyone feel bad, but like your non-comic fans, people who just kind of know movies and stuff, I feel like a lot of them don't realize how many publishers are out there.
Yeah.
So if I mention, let's say, Bloodshot, because that came out right before everything slammed into quarantine mode. So I mentioned it, and somebody was like, "Oh, is he a Marvel or a DC?" And I was like, "Neither." And they looked at me and they were like, "What do you mean neither? He has to be one or the other." And I was like, "No, there's a lot more out there." And like it was like I just like told this person the secret of the universe. They truly had no idea that there's more than Marvel and DC. And it in a way it's funny, in another way it's upsetting, because I think anything can be good. It doesn't have to be Marvel. It doesn't have to be DC. You know?
And I mean, obviously, they both have their wheelhouses, and both of them, specifically DC, over the years has had imprints like Vertigo, like this, whatever else,
Yep.
that they've been able to do other things outside of the superhero stuff. I mean, Marvel has its. Obviously the 616, and then it's got the Ultimates, and then it's got this and that, and then obviously you throw What If in there, and you've got essentially 3 different universes that you can play with.
Right.
Even though most, if not all, of those universes are superheroes when it comes to Marvel, at least it's different things. Same thing with the other publishers. Like I said, IDW for the longest time was the franchise publisher, because their run on Turtles.
Yeah.
Run on, like,
I have a friend who he has every issue. He loves it. He swears by that.
So good. So good. And there are things in that IDW TMNT series from issue 1 all the way up to 100, and even going on past that are just like, oh my God, they did what? Oh, and I've talked to Tom Waltz, and I've talked to Bobby Curnow a couple of times, and I got to catch back up with them, but like, what they've done, along with obviously having Kevin Eastman there, just what they've been able to do since it's been 11 years since IDW's had the license. So it's like, they just can't do really anything wrong at all when it comes to turtles.
Yeah.
So, all right, print or digital, which one, both, either or, and why not?
Oh man, that's a great question. And I'm sorry if that sounds like a candid or like a rehearsed response. But there's a quote by Stan Lee, and I don't know if you're familiar with it. But he said, he loves holding a comic book in his hand. He likes digital, but he basically said, and I'm getting the quote all wrong now, but he said comic books are like boobs. They're great to look at, but you'd rather hold one.
Yeah, that sounds like Stan.
Yeah. So I love having things in print. I love being able to hold on to the book. But this is just for me. I have some eye issues going on. So sometimes, reading a book on a tablet is great because it zooms in large enough where I can read it, if I'm having some struggles that day or something. So I love having the physical one in front of me. I don't mind doing it digital. I would hate to see it move to a purely digital format because, then if, let's say you're using Comixology, if Comixology shuts down, you don't have any books anymore. Like having a physical thing, you have to come into my house and take it from me. A digital one, the service shuts down, and then that's it. You don't have it anymore. So I'm always going to go print. Digital has become a nice tool to use.
I like and for me, because I've been technically legally blind since birth, even though I'm not actually blind. I have optic atrophy, which is nerve damage, which no surgery could ever fix, and I have nystigmatism, not astigmatism, so NY stigmatism. So basically, I have an issue with things farther away. Like basically, I can tell you that there's a stop sign down the street. I know it's the color red. I know it's the shape that the stop sign is, but I wouldn't be able to read STOP unless I'm less than 5 feet away from it, kind of thing. So,
right, I get that.
So for me, it's like I need to, in order to read the story, I need to see the words and whatever else. And Comixology back in 2013, when I started the show, it was amazing because they had guided view, and guided view was basically story by, it was panel by panel storyboard.
Oh yeah, it's very cinematic.
Storyboard reading. And we've talked about this at length, and I'll ask your opinion on it, but I hate Amazon for screwing it up.
Oh my God, dude! There was one morning I was getting ready for work, and I had just added a couple Marvel books, that week's Marvel books. I pulled the digital code, and when I went to download the books, it was like, you need to update. So I was like, all right, whatever, another update. I pressed update, and everything was different, and I hated it. And I was like frantically like, how do I default back to the old one? Like I was trying to look it up, and oh my God, what a pain the new system is. I don't like it at all.
And this is just my personal opinion, I don't know. I'm not a computer programmer. I don't program websites. My buddy Steve Megatron does all our website work and all that and everything else around here. In my personal opinion, I've said this before on this show, all is they would have had to have done to keep specifically web, Comixology web, so on Chrome, whatever you choose to use,
yeah.
all they'd have to do is put an Amazon in front of it or behind it. So if they wanted it to be Amazon.com, Amazon.comixology.com, or Amazon.com/Comixology, all they had to change was a URL. You could have still had the Comixology website. You did not need to bring this in. Kindle is for book reading. It's not for comic. Thankfully, for now, even though I hate reading on my phone, thankfully for now, at least as of this recording, as of September 2022, Comixology app is still available on mobile, and it's still the original guided view experience. Yes, you can pinch to zoom and everything else, but if you want it on a computer, if I want it on my 32-inch monitor here, sitting here as we're talking, as we are now, you can't have what I've had for the last 9 years, and it makes me so mad. Like, they did not have to do that.
And when the news broke, or when the update was pushed out, I was reporting about it a little bit on my show, and like the CEO of Amazon's like, we're gonna fix things. Comixology is probably a percent of what Amazon does business wise. And I'm not trying to knock comics.
No.
But,
You're right.
It's not their primary concern. So like it might be another year, if not more, before things get better. Like I used to buy stuff on Comixology and I feel confident doing it. Now I'm so confused when I go to buy stuff, and I know I sound like like the confused old man.
Dude, I'm right there with you.
It's not a friendly experience. It's
like, so. I mean, I can give you a perfect example because I will just go right now to my email, and because like I said, when I started this podcast, and I've told this story on air before, folks, so sorry. But when I started this podcast back in 2013, I was living in Louisville, Kentucky at the time. I was going to a local comic shop. I was buying books every week. Well, we wanted to cover Welcome Back Frank one week for a Marvel-specific Spotlight month. And
great story, by the way.
Great story. Perfectly fine in 12 individual issues. In a trade paperback that weighs probably 30 pounds, I'm holding this.
I have the hardcover.
I'm holding this thing in my hand, sitting in a chair away from my computer, trying to. And this is the first time I had I had something that huge in a long time as far as a trade paperback, and I'm like, oh my god! And that's 12 issues in the omnibus. Like I couldn't find any other collected version of it, and I didn't want singles. Like I just wanted to get the whole dang story. So I'm sitting there, and I'm reading about Frank doing this, or Frank doing that, or Frank killed, Punisher killed this person, or Punisher did this, or he came back this way or that way. Next thing I know, I'm snoring, my hand is relaxed, and the book crashes to thank God the apartment I was living in was carpet, but like the book crashed to the floor and woke me up. I'm like, wait, what the hell happened? The very next day after I read that book, I went on to Comixology.com and I said, no more print. Done. Absolutely. So from 2013, 2014 until now, I have been all the DC versus Marvel trade, which I recently got in the last couple of months, is the first physical comic I've had since 2014. But you're right. The whole system of it, like, and it's not, the whole percentage of Amazon, and you're right, it is a very low percent. And like, look, I get it. It's not their highest priority. But again, all they had to have done was just add an Amazon to the link. You could have had the Comixology website for web still. You didn't have anybody out there that's listening to the sound of my voice. If you read comics on your Kindle, please email feedback@geekcastradio.com and let me know. Because nobody I know reads comics on their damn Kindle. But the Amazon ordering thing, and it's not just the comics. I ordered, I don't know, something. Hi, Mike. Thanks for your order. Here's a summary of, you have these 5 items. Would you like to, in the email, would you like to view your order details? Like, no, I want you to send me an email with the items so I can see them, so I don't have to click view order details or click a link in your email to go to whatever. But like the email I just pulled up is for, what is it for? It's for a pre-order for something. Oh no, it was for something I had already bought. But basically, you click a link in the email and it goes, here's your receipt for Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles Reborn Volume 4. And I'm like, okay, cool. Great. That's my receipt. That's what I paid with. That's fine. That's the Amazon way for comics, and it's ridiculous. It's so stupid. Makes me so mad.
I get it.
And like, the one thing that I didn't like, I understand switching the payments and switching the this. You can only, like, you have to actually be on a physical computer on the Amazon physical website. I mean, technically, I guess you could do it on your phone if you use Chrome on your phone, but like, you can't update any comic stuff in the app, in the Amazon I'm like, oh god, you people. The one thing I hope they would not screw up, but they effed it up anyway, was the guided view. I don't want to pinch and zoom. Zooming is something you do with video and audio on some other service. Like, no, don't do that. Like, Go ahead. Sorry.
Yeah, and the mind-boggling thing is that I remember when I was on Comixology years ago, and it was like, hey, we're integrating to Amazon, like enter your Amazon details, and I did, and it was fine. And for years, it was fine.
Uh-huh.
Like the old saying, if it's not broke,
Yep.
don't fix it. I don't understand why they turned around one day and they were like, you know what needs an update? This perfect system.
Yeah. I never initially integrated until I was forced to. At one point, I reset Chrome or something, and everybody knows you reset Chrome if you're resetting your browser history. You basically, even though I have autofill and everything else, but you basically have to re-enter all your passwords. You log in everywhere again. I went to log in, and they're like, we're sorry, your Comixology.com account doesn't exist anymore. We don't recognize this login. Would you like to merge your Amazon? I'm like,
yeah.
So I merged it, and it was fine, and it was fine, and it was fine. And obviously, the last, what was it, 2020 or 20? I don't remember when that. We've done episodes in the past 2 years about this, obviously. So, and now it's just like, I don't even. That's why I like doing these origins and talking to people about how they get into or out of reading comics, because I don't have to review comics anymore. We still review comics, and I will still read the comics on the Comixology app on my phone, but it's not as nice as me being able to sit here on my computer on my 32-inch flat panel Samsung M7 that I could have a giant image of Batman punching the Joker in the face in my face right now. But no. Freaking Amazon.
Right. Yeah.
All right. So who are some of your favorite comics writers and why?
Oh, man. So I got it right away. The first one that comes to mind is Ed Brubaker. I wasn't reading Captain America, and when his first issue came out, the guy at the comic store that I was going to at the time basically handed me issue number 1. It was a relaunch, and he said, you need to read this. And I was like, all right, whatever. So I picked it up. I think at the time Marvel was doing a promotion where it was like a 99-cent issue or something. So I picked it up and I loved it. And his Captain America run, I still have every issue. I still love it. That is a beautiful run. He's another one who I will follow around when I see he's doing something new. I'll read it. I went back and read a lot of his work. And then, then I have some other ones like currently Donny Cates, I think is just knocking it out of the park. I think he's a great writer. Mm-hmm. Jeff Johns got me hooked with Green Lantern. Then I went back and read his what was it, JSA stuff that he did. So a lot of writers like that. Right now, Chip Zdarsky, who I always butcher his name.
Zdarsky, yeah,
I really like. There we go. I love his Daredevil run. He's on Batman now, and I'm enjoying it so far. So those are some of my favorite. I know there are more modern writers. I think when it comes to some of the old stuff, and nothing against it, but I feel like a lot of the times the writers just change so frequently that I never really had a chance to really bond with a writer per se. Like 90s X-Force is like my favorite thing in the world. And, it started with Liefeld, and then by like issue 13 or something, it was somebody else, but it feels like it was the same thing. So, that kind of stuff kind of gets a little weird as you go, I think.
I mean, I never, like, you always hear about those classic, those tent pole writers of, you hear about the Millers and the Bendises, and no disrespect to them. They did amazing work. They do amazing work.
Oh, yeah.
But when I got this, because I'm holding it in my hand now, I'm looking at the talent on DC versus Marvel, and you've got Ron Mars, Peter David on writing, Dan Jurgens.
Peter David, I love. I forgot about Peter David.
Dan Jurgens on art. Like, I've only ever read Dan Jurgens' stuff, like what he's written. I've never seen. So, like, obviously I've seen this, but like I need to go back and rediscover that. But it's like, oh wow, like just classic people. And yeah, I mean, but you know what? We're living in modern times now. And, I mentioned Kyle Higgins earlier, him, and who else? I generally tend to follow the characters. I follow writers too, but like,
right.
Whatever, Well, Jurgens did a lot of the Batman Beyond stuff in the last couple of years. Sean Gordon Murphy, oh man, his White Knight universe.
Oh yeah,
it's
I have all of that. That's been a lot of fun.
And Beyond the White Knight is so far is amazing. And I was 8 years old when Jason Todd got voted to die over the phone over a 900. Why would parents let their kids die? But I never cared.
Did you vote for that? If you don't mind me asking?
I never. Okay. At 8 years old, in 1988, I was more oogling Jessica Rabbit than worrying about whether Jason Todd was going to live or die. I mean, come on, But no, I knew about it because obviously it's just like Death of Superman. I knew about the Death of Superman. It was huge. I never read the book. I've still to this day have never read that. I knew about the black cover. I knew that they were killing him. Same thing with Jason Todd. I knew that they were killing him. I've liked Superman since Christopher Reeve. Say what you will about. I'm always that person that I can. Fiction is fiction. Reality is reality. I'm perfectly fine telling you that I like Clark Kent from Lois and Clark, even though Dean Cain nowadays is just a crazy loon. I don't know what his deal is, but I can separate the character and the portrayal outside of what, because that's the thing. In the 80s and 90s, we never knew any voice acting. Perfect example. Never knew who yes, obviously we know Kevin Conroy, voice of Batman, whatever else, but in 1992, that's the voice of Batman, and that's Batman's voice, or that's Bruce Wayne's voice. Same thing with Optimus Prime, Rodimus, in the 80s, I knew that, holy crap, Optimus Prime is now an evil talking car version of Kit. What in the hell kind of crazy universe is this? But, nobody knew. But now we've been living in an age since, 2005, 2006, whenever, and wherever, all the celebrities and everybody else, and oh my God, we have to not necessarily know about all of their lives, but we have to know everything that they've done, and that's just the way we are now. But nobody ever really cared, so
Yeah, and going along with that's a weird place too, because I don't walk around. I don't try to pride myself on being the biggest comic nerd in the room. I don't have to know everything, but every now and then somebody will be they'll name a name, and I'll be like, "Who's that?" And the reaction is how do you not know that they voiced this, and this? And I'm like, because I don't care.
Yeah.
And I'm not saying it to you, but there's this level of I don't know, people have almost entitlement that people have now when they, when they know something you don't, and it's okay, let's all just take a breath. We're all just talking about the same thing. You told me something new. That's cool.
That's the whole. And I get this is the way that deal was back then, but Mel getting all the credit for the Looney Tunes stuff. I'm sorry, unless Chuck Jones stepped on Mel Blanc's foot or something and made him go to a high falsetto, there's no way Mel Blanc is voicing Granny. That is June Foray. But it's just one of those things where, you just assume, oh, this person played this, and then nowadays we can just pick I can pick Kevin Conroy. I don't even need a crowded room. You just hear one inflection from that man. Who. Same thing with Peter Cullen. Same thing with Judd Nelson as Hot Rod. Same thing with anything Frank Welker does. I said this recently in the last.
Mark Hamill. Here's another example.
I said this recently in the last couple of months on a podcast. Heaven forbid the day we lose Frank Welker, because I don't know who in the Sam Hill they can get to replace him for Fred Jones, because that's essentially his voice. He's not putting on a voice. That's him.
Yeah.
So,
well, and that's a great thing you talk about, because I'm a big Transformer fan, and they at San Diego Comic-Con they announced a new Transformer series. I think it's called Earth Spark, and it's a different voice actor for Optimus Prime. It's Alan Tudyk. Thank you. And people, I've seen some people lose their minds. How is it not Peter Cullen? It's not my Optimus. And it's dude, I hate to say it, but first off, it hasn't always been Peter Cullen. There have been other shows where Optimus has been voiced by other people. But, like at some point, these people, and I hate to say it, but they're not going to be with us. So, like, you kind of got to get used to change. Like, because otherwise, what are we supposed to do? Stitch voice clips into everything they're going to say?
I mean, I say often that I would love to see the animation style of Generation 1 return somehow, some way. I would love to see that old Toei animation style return. But I know it's never going to, and from what I've seen of Earthspark, I said this recently on podcasts too, so hopefully the pullbag crowd hasn't heard me say this yet on other shows that they may or may not listen to. The fact that Alan Tudyk is the voice of Optimus Prime makes me laugh, because where I first knew him from was as Watt in A Knight's Tale with Heath Ledger, and I'm just like, please, somebody in that, whomever is doing the voice direction, please, somebody make Optimus Prime say, "I will fong you!" Oh, God. And then somebody pointed out to me, because I did not know this, because I do not follow, I have not watched it. It's not because I don't want to. It's just I don't always have HBO Max. You got to pick and choose your streaming services, folks, and I don't always.
Right.
So I did not realize he's the voice of Joker, and I'm like, holy crap. A Knight's Tale has 2 Jokers, and then, you go back to, who was it? It was, what's his name? Blake in Dark Knight. Who's the kid? Thank you.
Levitt.
Him and Ledger in 10 Things I Hate About You. You have Joker and Robin in the same movie in 1999. Yeah, so it's just crazy who, whatever. And like you said, it's not a voice you'd expect. Again, they're going for something new, something different. It's a whole... This isn't 2010. This isn't Hasbro trying to do the hub where they can just go to Peter Cullen. This is look at Nickelodeon with the Turtles stuff. I have been a lifelong Turtles fan, and I recognize that Rise of the TMNT is not for me, and that's okay, and that's fine. However, you look at the 2012 series, at first you had Jason Biggs and then Seth Green as Leo. You had Rob Paulson as Donnie. You had Greg Sipes as Mikey. You had Sean Astin as Raph. Okay. Rob Paulson used to be Raph in the old 87 series. Doesn't mean he can't try to do something different with Donatello. But then you have all these other people that I know from other things, but I'm perfectly fine that that's not Barry Gordon and Cam Clark and Townsend Coleman. It change is constant. And sadly, just like with cartoons and comics, we just have to put up with it, even though how they change certain things doesn't really work. Amazon. Anyway. What defines... Trying to pull it back around here, folks. What defines a good story to you?
When it comes to comic books, this is good. So I got, you're asking great questions. Like, I gotta say, I'm loving this. But for me, a good story is going to be a story that is true to who the character is while challenging them, and at the same time isn't going to throw some odd twist just to have it. Like if I'm reading Spider-Man, at the end of the day, yes, he's still going to be Peter Parker. But maybe he goes through something that affects him in some way, and maybe we can grow from that. One of the biggest, in my opinion, missteps of Spider-Man is you have a story like Kraven's Last Hunt, which to me is one of the darkest Spider-Man stories ever. And that could have been the start of a more adult Peter Parker. And then they didn't really, they just went back to, here he is, Peter Parker, down as a luck photographer. Which again, I'm fine with, but like, if you can make the character grow in a way that is still recognizable, I think that's really neat. If you can add little changes and almost like, preserve a legacy. I talked about Ed Brubaker and Captain America before. that was the run where briefly Steve Rogers was dead because, as we all know, death is a rotating door in comic books. But then Bucky picked up the shield, and having that happen, well, I thought was a great way to honor the legacy of Steve Rogers. You have his best friend taking up the mantle, and now in the comics we have Sam Wilson, playing the role of a Captain America, and that is Steve Rogers' partner, one of his partners, one of his really good friends. So and which is the route they're going in the MCU. And so, like, if you can make a legacy feel like it matters, I'm all for that. If like tomorrow they killed Bruce Wayne, and then I don't know, like Bullock was Batman, that would be like, well, what has he done to deserve this? But and they when Bruce Wayne was dead at post was it Final Crisis, and then Dick Grayson took up the mantle for a bit. Like, that was cool. That was following in the legacy of a man he looked at to be like a father figure. So if you can change it just enough where it's still, on paper, you're going to say, okay, this is still Batman, this is still Spider-Man, I'm fine with that, and it's always good to have some suspense, but the suspense has to make sense. If you're leading towards a villain and then all of a sudden it's like, swerve, it's been this character you've never heard of the whole time, it's just like, okay,
Yeah, those are the Marvel Sunbow years where 120 new Transformers came on the screen, like one new character for every half second of animation. Rebirth.
That's season 2. It was like, here are the ones who showed up on Earth. Here's everybody else who you never knew you needed.
Yep.
And I say that as someone who legitimately loves
absolutely. Well, yeah. But, the 120 new characters was Rebirth, because you look at those final 3 episodes of G1 here in the U.S.
Oh, yeah.
We talked, may the man rest in peace, he's been gone a while now, but back in 2010, we talked to David Wise, and we talked to him for a little while, and he even says on the old Rhino DVDs, because they have an old interview with him for that DVD set, he says it was something like 120 new characters in total, which is like one new character for every 2.3 seconds of animation that a new character had to arrive, kind of thing. So,
and with those characters too, like, you're not just talking about the robot. That was the age of Headmasters and Target Masters and whatever masters. So it was introducing the main robot and their humanoid component that became their head or their gun. It really is so many.
Yes, it is. All right, so what does a story have to draw you in? What is that first issue at the end of it have to make Dan want to come back and read the next issue?
Man, that wow. It's got to have some kind of wow factor.
Right.
Most of the times, especially when a book gets relaunched, because God forbid we do more than like 30 issues on a book anymore, we just relaunch to a number 1. But when they're relaunching it, when they're setting up a new story, there has to be something at the end of that first issue, that first chapter, that pulls me in enough, that creates enough of a mystery or enough of a moment where I can say, like, oh, wow, like, I'm going to keep reading it because they revealed this. One of the things that comes to mind is I think it was maybe it was Kyle Higgins. It was X-Force when they relaunched the team as like a Black Ops kind
of couldn't tell you. I was not reading Marvel then.
Okay, fair enough. But when they relaunched it as like a Black Op team, like every issue ended with like this character is pulling the strings. You haven't seen them in a while, and that was like a big wow moment. And then they'd build up, and they'd be like, they're actually paired with this one, and things like that really just make me go like, oh, whoa, like, I can't wait to read why does it have to end here? Things like that are always good. Recently there's a new Moon Knight book that Marvel's putting out. I think it's up to 13 or 14 issues now. And that has been a book too, that every issue just ends on enough of a cliffhanger where it's like, okay, how is Moon Knight going to get out of this? How is he going to react to this? What is he going to do in retaliation of this? That really makes me want to keep reading.
Yeah. No, absolutely. It's one of those things that, for me, it's if somebody tells me, they don't spoil it for me, but they give me enough of a hint of, like, was completely shocking what happened to Shockwave in IDW Transformers. I mean, you know, the shadow play of Impurata, like nobody expected that. Like, holy crap, kind of thing. You know.
Yep.
You know, like that unnamed senator is a character you know and loved for 40 years. I'm like, oh, really? Okay, well, I guess I'll find out. And I found out, and oh boy.
Oh, yeah.
Yep.
Oh, yeah.
Who are some of your favorite comics artists?
Oh, man. You know, it's funny because before I was saying how I'm kind of more with the current writers. I'm with the artists. It goes back to people, and like I might get crucified for this one, but I love Rob Liefeld. It's ridiculous. I know it's like a weird addiction. But like I think of Cable having the big shoulder pads, more pouches than any one human being ever needs to have, and maybe no feet at times, depending how he's being drawn.
Then. Yeah.
But you know, that's more of a guilty pleasure. I'm never going to sit here and put down a piece of Rob Liefeld artwork and say this is how you draw. Like I'm never going to do that to somebody. But you know, Todd McFarlane, Jim Lee, that stuff defines what got me into comics. You know, when I think of Venom, I think of Todd McFarlane's drawing of Venom. You know, from oh god, I'm terrible with the numbers, but whatever Amazing Spider-Man issue it was, where he's just smiling at Mary Jane. You know, like I think of that. You know, when I think of the X-Men, I think of Jim Lee's designs, especially from that X-Men #1. Like that is the stuff that I really dig. In fact, I recently got. It's a book of the collected edition of Jim Lee's X-Men cards from the early 90s. So like that is some of my favorite art style right there.
All right, you brought it up, so this is your own fault. Blue team card or gold team card?
Oh, blue team.
Why? It's got that whiny.
Oh, you mean the card in general, or
the card in general?
Oh, the card in general. I think the gold team card is a better card. Sorry, but when it came to preferred team, I always liked the blue team more.
I just wish they didn't have a whiny baby on their team as their leader. You mentioned it earlier about how cool Wolverine was and whatever else. I'm like, yeah, Wolverine's cool. And then you've got, and look, I'm not saying this to pay any disrespect to the late great voice actor that was Norm Spencer, but gee, like, oh, shut up already.
I will say my young brain rebelled against Cyclops being the leader of the X-Men, and when I played with my Toy Biz X-Men toys as a kid, Wolverine was the leader, and I remember friends of mine would be like, "But Cyclops is the leader on the cartoon." And I'm like, "And in my space, Wolverine's the leader." You know.
And for that one time, for that one video game and those couple of crossover episodes, Spider-Man could have been the leader of the X-Men. You don't know.
That is true. He was a friend of theirs.
That's right. Friendly neighborhood spider mutant.
There we go.
Do you have a favorite non-superhero comic title?
Would you count Transformers or no?
That would be non-super. They can be heroic, but they're giant alien robots from a distant planet. So superhero is anything that wears tights. So technically, I guess the Turtles couldn't be counted because Michelangelo wore superhero costumes several times.
That's true. Yeah, oh man. So I will say, Transformers is a big one if we're not going to call them superheroes. I have definitely read other books about, your non-traditional superheroes. One of the ones that kind of comes to mind even recently is, and I mentioned it a few times now, Geiger from Jeff Johns. That's just about a radioactive man stuck in a radioactive wasteland. I don't think he would call himself a superhero. I think he's just kind of trying to live his life and protect the people he thinks he needs to protect. So that, there's that. I also loved when they do like the Gotham Central books. These are your run-of-the-mill police officers and rescue workers who are they're just living in the craziest city on Earth. It's not their fault that Joker is poisoning people with fish. It's not their fault that the Riddler left a exploding riddle clue, at the firehouse or something. They're just ordinary people trying to do their job in the worst place in the world. Like, that's what that comes down to.
Yeah, no, absolutely. I completely agree with that. Yeah, it's oh, Gotham. Ah, Gotham.
So somebody said to me, "Would you ever live in Gotham City?" And I was like, "God, I hope not."
No. I mean, I'm sure Trenton, New Jersey isn't that bad, but it's close enough.
I mean, you also got Newark right
That's
around
true.
the bend too. So
Yeah, Newark is.
I will say I don't want to say the name of the city if that's okay, but I think it is the second highest crime rate in the world. Or in the U.S. is a city that is probably like 25 miles from me.
Oh no! Yes, well,
yeah. So I stay out of there.
Why would you want to go to Metropolis? Lex Luthor lives there. Stop it! Like, come on.
Well, and that's the thing. They always paint Metropolis in the comics as this shining beacon of hope. But really, it's like, you know what? Like, you got just as many problems. You just have nicer buildings. Like, there's not as much it's not dark there all the time,
Yeah, no, that's absolutely crazy. What is your favorite run of a series? So technically run, story arc, whatever, but basically how I define run of a series is like, and I don't know, I'm just going to spout out numbers, so I'm probably incorrect. Like Batman 661 to 665 or something. I don't know. But like, is there a specific run of a comic book series that you absolutely love?
So I'll give you two. I'll give you one that might kind of go out of bounds for you, and then I'll give you one that I think is a little more contained. One of my favorite things in the entire Marvel universe was the Annihilation story. And what spawned out of that was a Nova book and eventually a Guardians of the Galaxy book. And that couple years of Cosmic Marvel has a definitive end with the story called the Thanos Imperative. That is my favorite bit of Marvel, if not comic books ever. It starts with Annihilation. It was them trying to relaunch their cosmic universe. And we got a solid 5-6 years, maybe more out of it. And then it has a definite end because the heroes it showed us in the beginning save everything by seemingly sacrificing themselves. And it's a bookend upon itself. So Annihilation Cosmic Era Marvel, even though it is a number of titles, it's like my favorite run of anything. But if you're looking for like just an actual book, and I don't know the numbers off my head, but the Ed Brubaker issues of Daredevil, it starts with Daredevil going to prison, and then it goes into Mr. Fear, and eventually Andy Diggle takes over the title. The Ed Brubaker run is my favorite run of a larger ongoing series.
Very cool, very cool. Yeah, that question is always tricky, and I may have to, I don't know. I just, because again, when I'm thinking, when I'm asking some of these questions, it's more of, I'm thinking of history. I'm not thinking of current.
Right.
I could sit here and tell you that volumes 6 and 7 of More Than Meets the Eye are some of the coolest things because that's when Megatron became an Autobot kind of thing.
Yeah.
But I maybe could tell you that it starts at issue 28, but that's only because I know it. Whereas if I'm thinking from whatever issue number it was that Batman turned piss yellow or something, I don't remember. I know there was a time in history where Batman's suit looked like Robin peed all over him, kind of a thing. But so that's kind of where that question comes from. But like I said, it could be run or story arc or whatever.
Right. And I feel like now with the way comic companies do stuff, that's almost becoming harder to answer because I also love the Sinestro Corps War, and that was a couple issues of Green Lantern, but it was also a couple issues of the Green Lantern Corps. With maybe a couple of one-shots or something thrown in there. So, that's more like it's one of my favorite stories, but it's not necessarily a run,
What is one comic you can read over and over again, single issue or trade?
Oh man, one comic I can read over and over again. It's actually the first comic I ever got. It's Iron Man number 271. It has him getting crushed by Fin Fang Foom on the cover, and it was just such a cool issue when I was a kid, and like to see that Iron Man was fighting a giant green dragon. I thought that was just like the coolest thing, and I can still read that one and still have fun with it. And that might be more like in the rose tinted glasses category because it's just a lot of fond memories. But I could read that over and over again.
Very cool, very cool. Yeah, I may have to check that out because I've never. Again, I was a cartoon kid, so for me, Fin Fang Foom is something the Mandarin calls in the old '94 Iron Man show, and I've never understood. Like, I need to read up on that character because I've never really got the whole point of that, other than like this is the second boss before the big boss, kind of like this is the penultimate kind of thing. So we generally try our best not to be negative, but we do have to ask a few negative questions. If you're in your local comic book shop, are there comics you avoid altogether? So let's just say you go in this week, next week, whenever it is, and you see Batman, Superman, Aquaman, Wonder Woman. Hey, what's that Kid Flash doing in here? Get that. It's like Brussels sprouts. Get them Brussels sprouts off my plate.
Yeah, I'll tell you right now, and I think in the current climate of, especially with the MCU, this might be a little like a boo hiss, but I hate the Scarlet Witch. I love mutants, and after House of M, where she uttered no more mutants, she has been on my you-know-what list ever since then, and even though they've kind of tried to rectify her relationship with the rest of the mutants and try to, make her seem a little more heroic at times, I can't stand the character. So when they brought her into the MCU, and I'm not going to give any spoilers, but I'm constantly rooting for her death. I watched WandaVision kind of, out of the fact of like, well, I'm sure something's going to connect to it, so I have to watch it. I hate the Scarlet Witch. If my favorite author took up a Scarlet Witch solo title right now, I'd leave it on the shelf. I can't stand the character. Another one that I voiced this on Twitter a couple years ago, and some people got a little pissed off at me. I hate the Inhumans. I think even though I think they were technically around first, they're just X-Men on the moon, and I'm not impressed by them. And when Marvel was seemingly trying to push the Inhumans for the cinematic universe, and they were like, "Oh yeah, their mist is dangerous to mutants, and if the mutants breathe it, they're all gonna die." I was like, no, F these characters. I'm not behind this at all. When Donny Cates did the Death of the Inhumans book, I was like cheering because I was like, yeah, kill them all. Let's go. So, so those are a couple Marvel characters I won't read. I tried recently, they kind of did the big push for Spawn. It was like the year of Spawn. So I tried to read some of the Spawn stuff, and I never read Spawn growing up, so I was kind of like, okay, I know what he's about, I know his deal, and I read it, and I just couldn't get into it, and I read a couple of the books, so now, unfortunately, like, if they tell me, hey, there's a new Spawn book, I'm just going to be like, that's nice, and I'm just going to keep moving. Yeah. So, and I know some people love Spawn, but it wasn't for me.
Like I've said already throughout I saw the movie. Maybe I was a little too much of a teenager at the time. When the hell did that movie come out? 95, 96?
Oh, man. I think it was 96 or 97. Because I remember going in and lying that I was 13.
Yeah, so...
I think I was 12. So the guy in the theater was like, you 13? Yeah. Do you have ID? I'm 13.
Well, I mean, technically, he wasn't wrong by asking you that, because I remember... around that age, because I grew up in, I think I'm 2, 3, 4 years older than you, but I grew up in the age of, we were DARE kids, we had DARE officers, we had the police ID program kind of thing. So by the time we were 13, 14 in 93 and 94, we may have had like some sort of not necessarily government state ID like you get when you turn 18 and all that, or when you get your license kind of thing, but we had some sort of weird ID card. So I kind of understand why you would ask. Yeah, I never get into Spawn. It's one of those things like you. It's like, I don't care. Whatever. But never really get into it.
Yeah, I aside from the Scarlet Witch and to a degree the Inhumans, I don't think there's ever been a character that I have like a visceral, like, no way when I see a comic. Recently a lot of people have been like, and more than recently, it's been happening for a number of years now. People are like, Harley Quinn. I don't care. I got one friend from college, and he might hear this, and I don't really feel bad if he does, but like, he's always like, oh, my wife and I relationship is like Joker and Harley. And I've been the a-hole on like Facebook, and I'm like, which one of you is the psychotic killer and which one of you is the child rapist? And like, he does not appreciate that. But I'm like, dude, don't compare your happy marriage to this terrible dysfunctional relationship between two psychopaths. Like, don't do that. That's a bad look.
Yeah, that's not, no. And again, I mentioned this earlier and I'll mention it again here. The only version of Harley that I really dig is, in comics specifically, is Murphy's universe, because in his universe, Jack and the Joker, it's a split personality. So Jack Napier is his own man, which technically means that Harleen is her own person. It's not just, here, I got this girl off the street. I'm going to dress her up in clown makeup and screw her life up and, make her do all these weird things and,
Right.
So, yeah, but generally it's like, oh, God, I don't get it. I respect that people like it, because anyone can like or dislike whatever they want, but it's those people that take it to that kind of degree. It's like, okay, I'm going to step back about 10 feet away from you because I don't want to get hit from the implosion that's going to happen here. It's just crazy.
Speaking of getting hit, can I give a quick aside to that? So I've gone to a number of New York Comic Cons, and there was one year where somebody was dressed as the Joker, and it was a cosplayer who took things a little too seriously. They decided they had to act like how they think the Joker would act. No. And there were a group of people dressed up as Jedi, and they were doing a very cool lightsaber demonstration where they were showing people like, different moves. And this guy who was dressed as the Joker kept like jumping in and being like, "Oh, don't hit me." Hoo-hoo-hoo. And the Jedi guys kept very politely asking him, like, "Listen, man, we don't want to hit you. We don't want you to get hurt. You need to not do that." And he'd be like, "Oh, okay, whatever." And he kept doing it. And finally, one of the Jedi guys just got so pissed that when the Joker jumped in again, he like whacked him with the lightsaber and ended up giving him a bloody nose. And the response was like, "See, this is why you don't do that. See how hurt you?" Like scolding him like he was a child, like a kid who touches the stove. You're like, "Oh, that's hot." They were like, "Oh, this is why it was bad." And I'll never forget just like kind of laughing at that, because I was like, "No, they warned you. You had that coming."
If they tell you at least twice, then you need to listen. If they do not tell you after that second time and the third time you try to do it and you get basically your hand caught in the oven, then that's your own damn fault.
Yeah, and they told this guy 5 or 6 times before they just got
please
fed up,
stop. Like, don't.
So yeah, I'm not pro violence, but don't be a jerk.
Yeah, absolutely. All right. So, are there any comics in the past or currently that you wish you had not read them? So basically, you read these books and you're like, damn it, I wish I had the last 20 minutes of my life back.
There was a Green Lantern title during the New 52. It was called New Guardians. And they put an annual out. And the annual, because annuals are a little larger and, when it comes to page count, it was so bad. And I feel bad saying this because I don't like to throw shade at people, but I didn't finish reading it because it was just so wordy and so long that it probably took me 20 minutes to get to the point that I got to.
God.
And then I just said, like, you know what? Like, I'm done. I don't want to keep reading this. This is just not for me. So I put that down. There have definitely been other books where I was loyal to the team or the character, and then they relaunch it, and like I'm just like, no, but I love the first run, so I got to keep reading it. And you just read it, and then eventually it's just like, why did I spend not only so much time but so much money continuing to read this book? Like, I know a lot of people, kind of crap on this one, but Chuck Austin's X-Men, I read that, and by the time it was done, I was like, why did I keep reading it? Like, at the same time, Grant Morrison's new X-Men was going on. So you had this shining star of an X-Men book compared to this one that they have erased from continuity,
Yeah. It's just so crazy. I mean, there are, and that's the difference. Like single issues you can read within 5, 10, 15, 20 minutes, depending on if you're
right.
reading it. See, the way I do it for the show is I will read for the story, and then I will go back and look through for the art. And then when we get to the recording, I'll be like, oh yeah. And on this panel, this was said, or, oh yeah, I love how this panel just kind of explodes off my phone kind of thing. Whereas trade reading, collected edition reading, that's a 2 to 3 day experience. Like you have to take notes.
Yeah.
You like specifically reading for the story, not necessarily, notice. I mean, yes, notice the art, obviously, but trade reading is a whole other level of reading, which is sadly why, as much as I would love for this to happen, I don't think comic books are ever going to go away from single issues, because as great as it is that I would love to have the entire story within 1 month, like let's just take I think it's in September, I believe they're going to release the last of 6 issues for Batman Beyond Neo Year. It's a 6-issue miniseries. They're going to collect that at some point in some trade paperback form.
Oh yeah.
But it's 6 issues. Like, 6 issues is a lot to read at once. Like I mentioned earlier with Welcome Back Frank, in its collected form, the only collected form that I know that you can get it in is 12 issues. That's going to break your wrist. You're going to need at least 3 days to read that book if you're reading it in physical form.
Right.
How large or small is your physical comic book collection?
Oh, man. That's a rough question. It was very large. I've actually this past summer started going through and really culling down on my collection, and this kind of goes back to when we were talking about digital versus physical before. If I find that I have a complete run of something or a complete story digitally, and maybe I don't need the issues anymore, maybe it didn't mean that much to me, I feel like I can get rid of them. But right now, my basement is my man cave, if you will. Right now, I got about 16 short boxes and 4 or 5 long boxes down here, with also a full file cabinet of comics. And then I just sold off 7 long boxes worth of comics. So I'm cutting down on it, but it's pretty large. It's pretty substantial. When my wife and I we were in an apartment, everything was still at my parents' house. And when we moved into the house together, one day it was like, okay, this is the day I'm bringing all the comics up here. And I don't think she was prepared for just the amount of boxes that just kept coming in.
Yeah, no. They're never prepared. When I recently moved from Washington State here to Indiana, and I did not want to deal with boxes. Did not. So a couple of years ago, when my late wife and I moved to various places, one of our moves, we're like, we're done with dealing with boxes for most things. And most of the things that we were done dealing with boxes was my Funko Pop collection. And I didn't have...
Right.
Most of the stuff is still in storage now with my dad, but I have about 188 Funko Pops in total. 189, something like that. It's not, I mean, compared to some of the people you'll see that have 500 or 1,000 or 2,000, and look,
it's a wall of their house.
I mean, technically mine is and can be and has been a wall of my house or apartment or whatever, but I have the hard stack tote things, and I'm like, that's what I want to move everything in. I don't want, if I can get away with not having any boxes, unless I absolutely have to have a box, fine, but I want everything. So I know what you mean when it's like, she didn't realize what she got into with all of these boxes coming into the house.
And to that note too, I'm gonna give everybody listening a free piece of advice, if I may. If you do have a lot of comics, switch them to short boxes. Like 12, 13 years ago, one of my best friends moved from one apartment to another, and the parking lot for his first apartment was right down the stairs. So you walked right down. The two of us were bringing his long boxes up and down together, put him in the car. We go to this new apartment that had a parking facility, and then you had to walk, a short walk to his second floor apartment. And it was in August. It was hot as hell, and we thought we were going to die moving all these long boxes. And it came to the point where, we would each get a long box. We had to help each other because we were just getting so tired. Ever since then, I was like, short boxes. I can lift a short box by myself. Even if I'm feeling run down, I can lift a short box. So if you were a comic collector, short boxes. That is the best thing you can do.
So your wife is safe, the pets are safe, but the house is on fire. What is one comic you cannot live without? What is one comic you can not live without ever? So basically, what's the one comic you'd run in and save?
Oh, man. Whew. So, I'd have to find it.
You don't have that kind of time, but if you know what the title is, fine.
So, you know what? This might sound a little silly, but a couple years ago, I was at a convention up in Connecticut. It's called Terrificon, and Tom King was there. And I really like Tom King's Batman run. He signed my Batman issue 50, which was supposed to be the wedding of Batman and Catwoman. And that is, it's one of those books where every page is a different artist, and it was really cool. And I was reading the story the whole time, so not to give the spoiler of what happens in that comic, but when it happened, it made sense to me, as opposed to people who ran to the comic store and were like, what do you mean this happened? Because they weren't reading the story. I think that one, just because it's signed by him, I thought it was a cool issue. The only other one that I'd probably go with would be the original X-Force #1, because I love X-Force. So, and I know where that box is. It has a big label on it that says X-Force.
There you go. That's awesome. What was the most money you spent on a comic or a comic item? Comic item could be a print, a lithograph, a collectible, whatever it is.
I'll give you both. I'll leave the collectible side out of it. I think you and I might have a separate conversation.
Most likely,
because I have I have an extensive Transformer and Marvel Legend collection, so that'll be a different conversation. But I'll tell you, prints and comics. I think the most to this day that I've spent on a comic, I got the first appearance of Apocalypse from X Factor at a local shop here a couple years ago now. I think I paid $45 for that, and I think that's the most I've ever spent on a single issue ever. Because I like to go dollar bin diving, when I'm at a convention, spend $1 or $2 on a comic. So spending $40 is probably, it wasn't graded. It was just, loose in the store. That's probably the most I've ever spent on a single issue. But I do have, there is a very, very talented artist. He did Transformer art for a while. His name is Livio. Thank you. And I know some people don't like his stuff. I do. He had some New York Comic Con many years ago. He was just doing sketches, and I said, I love your Transformer work. I said, would you be able to do a sketch of Megatron fighting Deadpool? And he laughed, and he was like, yeah, I can. And I think he charged me $120 for it, but it is framed in my house. It's not in direct sunlight, so it doesn't fade, but it is this beautiful large print that he just did in the course of maybe an hour and a half.
Wow.
And Yeah, he took his time with it, but it is super detailed. The Megatron has like Cybertronian glyphs on part of him, so it looks like, it's almost like a brand or a tattoo. And the Deadpool is jumping and like shooting his gun at him, trying his best to not get squished by Megatron. So it's a very cool art print that is framed, and I'm gonna that's something that like hopefully if I ever have a kid, I can be like, you like comics because this will be yours in the will.
Yep. Yeah, Livio's awesome. I got to get him on the show one of these days at some point. I just got a couple months ago. He was doing a limited run of he collected these and all in one little book. The art of Livio Remendelli from IDW's Transformers. So it's all these covers and that kind of thing.
Awesome.
And he's like, yeah, this is going to be a limited run kind of thing. And he's like, I'll even do a little sketch inside for it. It was like $60. And this is a couple months ago, and I'm thinking I'm getting a steal. I'm getting a comic, like a separate, piece of paper, and that's fine. It is what it is, and I absolutely love what he did. So what he did was from season 3, The Burden Hardest to Bear. I basically wanted him to in his style show me Rodimus Prime at the point where he realizes that he's okay with his Yiri, because he realizes after everything that happens in that episode, like, oh, I need to have the Matrix. The Matrix is this is my burden. This is this. No one else can have. Scourge can't deal with this. Galvatron can't, all this, all that, and everything else. So it's a nice little inside sketch inside the book, and that's just a fun book to commemorate the covers and the art that he did for IDW for the Transformers run.
That's awesome.
Yeah, absolutely. Was there good?
Yeah, and I gotta say, he is one of the nicest human beings I've ever met.
Absolutely.
Every time I see him at a convention, he'll stop and he'll talk. At this point, I like to think he remembers me. I don't know if he really does, but he always talks to me. He talks to my wife. He really just a generous, wonderful, pleasant human being.
That's awesome. That's great. It's always nice to, when you meet your comic favorites or your comic people that you enjoy, that they are actually, and I know a lot of them are decent human beings, and then there are some of them that really aren't, and that's not so great.
Yeah.
So there is that. Was there ever a moment when you were completely done with comics?
Yes, and this is something now that I look back and I kind of, I'm going to say I kick myself over, but, when I was going through high school, the MCU wasn't around. We had one X-Men movie, and by the time I was a senior, a second X-Men movie, and I guess a Spider-Man movie. And it wasn't cool to like comics, and if the cute girl sitting in the back of the room with me saw me doodling, not that I'm an artist, but, Spider-Man or Wolverine on the back of my notebook, I'd get made fun of. So when I was in middle school and high school, I didn't actively buy comics. And although I was interested, and I had a subscription to Wizard magazine, that was about the extent of it. That was how I kind of kept in the know with comics, but I didn't publicize it. I didn't tell anybody I read comics because I didn't want to, I was a total nerdy kid as it was. I was skinny, I got picked on. So it was one less thing I didn't want people to be able to pick on me for. So throughout high school, I didn't actively read comics. And in retrospect, yes, it led to some easier times, which I hate to say it like that, but I felt like I was betraying myself in that I wasn't being true to what I was really into. Like a lot of my friends, they were into wrestling, so I'd be into wrestling, and you talk about all like the wrestling divas and, who looks good in X bikini or whatever, or how strong the Undertaker is or whatever it was. And nothing against wrestling. I'm not trying to shame wrestling fans right now, but that was more widely accepted watching this sports-esque soap opera, than reading comics. So it was kind of just keeping that stuff quiet to stay alive,
Yeah. And I think the mid to late 90s things shifted. There were plenty of times where comics were fine and everything else and all this and all that. But again, things change, things move, things come back, obviously. But it's just one of those things where if you wanted to be in with the popular kids, you had to. And I liked wrestling before any of those kids ever did. Undertaker, who? Talk to me when you know Junkyard Dog or Roddy Piper
There we go.
or Hulk Hogan or Mean Gene,
British
British Bulldog. Look, I like the Undertaker. I think he's a great character. I think it's awesome. But that whole '90s era, man, that Attitude Era gave a lot of fans like. People wonder where wrestling fans get their attitudes. Most of them that grew up then got them then, and they continued as those people have aged into adulthood.
Oh, yeah. Well, and just sometimes like the audacity of some of that stuff. Like, I remember when D-Generation X was the thing, and everybody would be yelling, "Suck it." And some kid would yell that at a teacher in school, and it would just be like, "Whoa, no, I don't care how cool DX is. You don't say that to somebody."
Yeah, no, not at all. No, So, I mean, and the thing about school is not yes, obviously you go to school, you have some of your friends that are you're friends with them all the time, but also you have specific friends that are just school friends, and sometimes they're into comics, sometimes they're into cartoons, and sometimes they're into this, that, or the other thing. And I remember I was in 5th or 6th grade, so 91 or 92, somewhere around there. Somebody asked me, "Oh, what are you going to do this weekend?" I'm like, "Oh, it's Friday night. I'm going to go home, listen to some hard rock, and think about calling a girl." The teacher overheard me say this to another. It was just a simple answer to a question. I didn't say anything derogatory, but the fact at 5th or 6th grade that it was wrong for me to be listening to hard rock or even thinking about heaven forbid. The early 90s, the whole decade was whack, WHACK, but certain areas of that decade, man, just wowzers. Yikes.
Yeah. And even going along with that, one of the, I did say I kind of hid my comic, interest and obsession, if you will. But I remember being in 6th or 7th grade and like drawing something about Wolverine on the back of it. Or you know what? I'm sorry. It was 8th grade. I drew something with Wolverine, and like he wasn't like running anybody through, but this is a now post Columbine world. Yeah. And a teacher of mine saw it and like, got worried and like called my mom that I was drawing, angry and threatening images and things like that. My mom was like, "Nah, he just likes his comic books." And like, that man had knives, blah, 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 So like my mom had to like at some point politely be like, "Listen, I know you like this stuff, but like you got to be careful who sees it." Cause now, with all this hysteria about people hurting people in schools and I was picked on. So if there was ever someone who, not that I'm not a violent person, but people would single me out and be like, "That kid could be a problem," when I was just trying to live my life and, enjoy my interests.
Yeah. And I think there's a huge difference in you and maybe some like-minded friends of yours in high school sitting in a corner whispering to each other that, you dislike this person or you dislike that person, and you're going to like, there's a huge difference in having a conversation about potentially making plans and drawing a comic book character on your binder.
Right. I'm not sitting there saying they're on my hit list or something.
No, I mean, as long as you didn't draw Johnny come whatever as, you know what I mean? Like, as long as it wasn't any of your...
Yeah, that's the guy that Spider-Man is, punching out.
Yeah, exactly.
Venom's eating their head or something.
Oh, man. Yeah, that's crazy. What are you reading right now, and what do you think our listeners should check out?
So I recently cut back on my reading list, but I am still reading. I'm reading Moon Knight, which I think is fun. It is a more supernatural than what people may have gotten on the television show. He's like fighting vampires right now. I'm reading Spider-Man. That's more out of loyalty. I've been reading Spider-Man for a very long time. Zeb Wells is currently writing it, and there's about to be a what seems to be a really cool Hobgoblin story, so I'm on board for that. I'm reading Batman. I'm reading Daredevil. As I said, they're both being written by Chip. And I just think he's a great like street level crime kind of writer. Everything that he writes, I've been finding very interesting. And then, I read some other things here and there. There are a couple big events going on right now, but those are always a little hard to jump into if you haven't read what came before or don't have really much of a knowledge of that. So I think that would be the stuff I'm mainly recommending.
Yeah,
how about you? Are you reading?
Man,
what are you reading these days?
I read to review stuff on this show. I know the only 2 books that I'm getting monthly right now is Beyond the White Knight and that 6-issue miniseries Neo Year, Batman Beyond Neo Year.
Right.
I have been out of Marvel for I've only ever dipped my toe in, really. I mean, I've never really okay, so when we started the show, we started with the whole purpose why this podcast even started was we started it on our flagship show called GCRN Radio, where my buddy Matt Spada and I talked about 698 to 700, because 700 was the, oh my God, Peter Parker, oh my God, Spider-Man, all this and all that, and Spider Island, and whatever else was going on. And then we switched over to Superior. And I was like,
yep.
Finally, a Doc Ock story I can actually get behind. Because, look, I like him. He's all right. But not really. I don't really like most of... Yeah, I can safely say after 9.5 years, most of Spider-Man's Rogues Gallery, I just don't care. Like, especially Osborn. Don't you? Either one of them. I don't care. I don't care which one has the green on. Like, it just... I don't know, man. Like, even Craven. Like, I likes to see... Wow, I can talk. I like to...
It turned into Gollum there.
Spider-Man, my precious. I like to see Spider-Man team up with, like, Black Cat to go after something. I want to see Miles. I want to see Miles Morales. I want to see his universe of whatever. And I've never really read the Ultimates. I've only stuck in the main universe when I've read stuff. So I don't know. I know of Miles. I know who Miles is. I know his story. I've watched people play the video games, the expansion pack that was it 2015 that the original game came out for Insomniac? Anyway,
God, has it been that long?
I think so, yeah. Well, I just opened opened Steam a couple hours ago as of this recording. This is how old I am with video games, folks. I'm still playing Grand Theft Auto 4. Thank you very much. I just use it as stress relief more than anything else. But I opened up Steam, and they're like, oh, this is your last chance to pre-order and a big giant thing of White Spider with the red background. I'm like, oh, God, how long has that game been out? Yeah, in general, I don't, just in a general sense, I don't really care anything about his Rogues Gallery at all. I'm not saying it's a bad Rogues Gallery, it's just I don't know. That's why I liked Superior so much, is because, you've got a villain who has to kind of force himself to be a hero. And I know technically, people do that all the time, and it's the tale as old as time kind of thing when it comes to comic books, but finally, Otto was interesting to me. Like, he, that kind of thing, and I don't know. But yeah. Okay, so for superhero archetypes, do you prefer heroes, heroines, anti-heroes, or heroines or villains?
Oh, man. So, I think at the end of the day, I always like to see the hero save the day. I like to see the hero save the girl. With the one exception of Gwen Stacy, I will... Like when Spider-Man, the Amazing Spider-Man 2 came out, I knew where that story was headed. I knew what was going to happen in that movie. And it was the weirdest moment of my life because I was smiling while crying. So, but I love to see the hero win, but I really like villains. You know, I think the hero can only be as interesting as their villain. And, you know, that goes for the X-Men, it goes for Transformers, it goes for Batman and Spider-Man and Daredevil. If you can have a really cool, menacing, interesting villain, that's going to bring the hero to a different level, you know? And when I look at things like from the 80s, like Transformers or Thundercats or He-Man, you know, every episode's the same. The villain does a plot, they think they have the upper hand, the hero wins. And then I feel like, you know, and to an extent, same thing with comics. And then finally it started happening where it was like, no, you know what? Like, now we're going to have the hero not know how to get out of it. Now it seems like the hero is going to be defeated. And just seeing those cool ways that maybe the hero doesn't always win, I got really into that. So I you know, if a villain's motivation is more than just, you know, take over the world, see? I don't know why they became a gangster, but you know, if the villain can have a cool motivation, then I'm behind it.
Yeah. Yeah, see, it's the gangster comic, don't you know? Yeah, it just, yeah. I don't know. Do you have a my parents got rid of my comics story?
Luckily, no. My parents, although as I got older, especially in my teenage years, although they weren't thrilled that I had such a large comic collection and collectibles and stuff, they never said, like, we're throwing this out, you know, you're done. I think the only thing that ever really happened was, you know, my brothers and I were like the first grandchildren born in my family. So a lot of the older toys that maybe I didn't quite hold on to as much, like my Marvel figures or Transformers, sometimes it'd just be like, your cousins are coming over and they're going to play with like these Thundercat toys, or they're going to play with these He-Man toys or these Star Wars toys. So, you know, I was the careful kid who wouldn't bash things together. But then my cousins would come over and He-Man's going flying across the living room and Skeletor's leg got ripped off and now I'm crazy gluing it back on kind of thing. So, and no ill will towards any of my cousins who were doing that. They were young, but like they knew, okay, your cousin's Marvel figures you don't touch. You can play with everything else in the house. Don't touch his Marvel stuff, you know? So while they never got rid of anything, my parents were just like, they need something to play with. They're going to play with this. You know, stop being angry about it. So
and let's face it, those mutants are expendable. I mean, Slythe and Monkian and Jackal Man and Vulture Man, they're expendable.
Every now and then, because now I have nieces and nephews. Now my brothers have kids. So every now and then, you know, when they're over, they pull out the bin of old He-Man toys. And this actually just happened where I was like, oh, all my Horde members are still looking pretty good. Hey, nephew, what's that over there? Swipe the Horde members like they're going to come home with me now, you know? I'm staring at the original Hordak, Mantenna, Leech, and Grizzlor on my shelf right now.
That's awesome.
Yeah. A little beat up, but their arms and legs are still fully intact.
That is so cool. What is one item from a comic book you'd love to have in the real world? So examples, obviously, the Batarang, the Green Lantern ring, that kind of stuff.
You know, I've always wanted to like fly as a person. So if we could just like go straight up mutant powers, like I'd be like Archangel. I would love to just have wings on my back and be able to fly around instead of having to pay for gas or something. Realizing that might be totally impractical for any shirt that I ever buy again, I would settle for just like a jetpack. You know, if I could have a jetpack and not crash into things, you know, be proficient in piloting that, I think that'd be really cool. The Green Lantern ring, you know, something like that not only lets you fly, but gives you, you know, the constructs and stuff. That kind of follows along with that idea, but something that would allow me to fly and maybe conceal it when I needed to. So again, having a set of wings on my back might not be the best, but you know, something that I could stick in my pocket and if I didn't want anyone to know, you know?
Yeah, so basically you want a Green Lantern ring with a power battery because there ain't no way in heck you're going to be able to fly that jet. I mean, if Cliff Secord can't fly that jetpack all that well, you're not going to be able to become a Rocketeer anytime soon.
Yeah. Yeah, I am not a special person when it comes to that stuff. So,
oh man. So if
what about you? What's your favorite comic gadget?
Man, I would probably want a bunch of batarangs just to throw at people I don't like. You get a batarang, and you get a batarang.
Someone cuts you off in traffic, batarang to the tire.
Yeah.
All right.
Oh, God. Yeah. Oh, man.
So somebody, a child once said to me, they said they wish they could have an Infinity Gauntlet. And I said, why? Because I was a little concerned. And I was like, why? And they said, well, if Thanos eliminated half of everybody, I would just make double so everyone had enough. And I was like, oh, that's a beautiful motivation, kid.
That's not how creation works. There's a lot of things that you don't know, kid. Things that you can't know until you're in late middle school, early high school.
One day you'll understand supply and demand.
Sometimes the demand outweighs the supply and vice versa. All right.
Yep.
Either company, whichever company, Marvel, DC, whatever, I assume you're going to pick Marvel. But if they give you the keys to the kingdom, what is one story that you would want to create?
Whew. So, So one thing that I've always wanted to see, but I felt like we never really got enough of is, I grew up reading comics in the 90s, so there are a lot of obscure Marvel teams that I feel like never got more than they were the villain in the book. They'd show up here and there. So like teams like the Mutant Liberation Front or like Apocalypse's Dark Riders, I would love, even if it was like a 5-issue miniseries, to be able to flesh some of those characters out, give them like proper motivations other than just like, we're evil mutants. I something like that I think could be really interesting. Kind of when you humanize these characters who are never more than a punching bag, I think that could be cool. But aside from that, and they've kind of joked about it in the past, but like Moon Knight used to, and I think still does, get his strength from the phases of the moon. So just put Moon Knight on the moon, and he'd be like the strongest person ever. Make him like the first line of defense. Galactus is coming. He like jetpacks off, the moon, punches him out, and that's it. It's ridiculous and it's stupid, but I would love to see that.
That would be interesting. This is completely side note, but did you ever watch the Superhero Squad show?
I did.
Okay.
I here and there. I didn't watch it like front to back, but I definitely saw some episodes.
So there's only the 2 episodes that I can think of off the top of my head. It might have been a 2-parter, but anyway. They have Galactus come in, and they basically lean into his world eating. Like, not Thanos, Silver Surfer, did you get the planet ready for me to consume? Kind of thing. Like, I want lunch, and Earth is going to be... He's voiced by George Takei. I'm like, it's the single greatest piece of voice acting for a Marvel villain ever. When it comes to that character, when it comes to Galactus, the only Galactus I want is George Takei Galactus. Yeah, exactly. Exactly.
Did he physically like grab chunks of planet and eat it too, or was it like the world eating machine?
I think it was like the world eating machine, but I do not remember. I would have to look it up.
I just like it's like that would kill me like a kid's cartoon. Like, yeah, he's a world eater. He's eating the world.
What is the one piece of advice you would give the comics fandom?
If you haven't started collecting, don't start. Just you'll save a lot of money. But no, in all seriousness, be open-minded. I go to a comic store on a somewhat weekly basis, and every now and then you get, I don't want to be rude, but like these grumpy old fans, and they see somebody picking up a book with a new character or a character that is different in some way, and you get these people like, oh, you're gonna read that trash? Oh, I wouldn't touch that with a 10-foot pole. And like, you know what, you can have your opinion. You might not want to read the new, I don't know, America Chavez book or the new Spider-Woman book or the new whatever book. But if you see someone picking up that book, be open-minded. Maybe it's not your cup of tea. Maybe you don't like the writer. Don't shame somebody into liking that stuff, because I have seen too many people who could potentially become regulars in a comic store put a book down and then leave because some angry old man who's there to pick up his, issue of Spider-Man, then complain that it's not as good as when he was a kid, made somebody feel bad about buying something.
Yeah, absolutely. Like, and most what everyone says is something similar along those lines, or most people will just say, everybody calm down.
Yeah.
I mean, that's really what it is.
And I feel like we are at a unique time in both the real world and in comics, where that we have a lot of social issues and a lot of changes going on. And I'm not trying to get all political or anything, but comics are a reflection of life. So now you get these characters who maybe they're gay, or maybe they're trans or something. And people get so angry that they're, suddenly this character is this, or suddenly this new character is this way. And it's like, but there are real people out there. So don't hate on someone for reading something that you feel doesn't reflect you, because I'm a white male. For most of my life, comics have reflected me. So I think it's okay that there are now comics that reflect other people, whether it be gender, race, religion, sexuality. I think that is, that's good, because we're not the only comic readers out there.
And as much as I want to read the stories, part of the stories is whatever the characters are going through. Like if Sam Wilson goes from being the Falcon to being the new Captain America, okay, great. How's his home life? What's he doing? What's going on with him? That's the thing. Like, it's.
I was going to say there, I feel like there is also a fine line between drawing inspiration from whatever cultural diversity you may have, and then like kind of beating people over the head with it, because there have been some times in that I've read a comic where I'm like, all right, I get it. You're, XYZ, whatever. Like, I get that. Like, I'm still here to read about your superhero activities, not about this. You can, if you put it in, that's fine. But sometimes if like that is suddenly the story, I can understand why people do get turned off.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, it's just,
and not to sound intolerant or anything. I hope I don't come off as that.
Yeah, I don't think you will. But you're right. I mean, it just, comics are for everybody, no matter who you are. They may not always be written by the right people or the wrong people or the whatever people, like, or created by whatever, but they're a form of fiction that we all should enjoy. And if we don't enjoy them, then don't read the ones that you don't enjoy. Like, like we said earlier, you're not the biggest Wanda fan in the world, no matter how cool Vision is, so.
Yeah, but I see, again, if somebody picks up, a Scarlet Witch book, I'm not going to sit there and be like, oh, how could you do that?
Yeah,
she's terrible. Like, I would never do that. Like, good for you for reading that.
Yeah, we are too old at this point to turn into those old men that have come before us, where they're just sitting there, Mr. Comic Book Guy, do you have my comics this week? I'm looking for 1940s Captain America. I'm like, nope. See ya. Right. Those are out of print in the year 2177 or whatever. I don't know.
Yeah. And I've heard people say things like, I don't like this new Captain America run. I want Captain America to save the blonde and punch the bad guy. And it's like, there's more. There's so much more that these characters can do now.
Well, maybe this is just the MCU person in me, but newsflash: Peggy was not blonde, at least not in the movies.
That
is also true. If you really want Captain America to punch out the bad guy and save the chick, and you're talking about Steve, then Peggy ain't a blonde. Thank God.
Right.
All right, folks, we're going to take a quick break. You're going to hear some ads and some other stuff, and we will come back to get Dan's contact info and all that other good stuff and any final thoughts he may have right after this.
Hello, geeks. Want a podcast that covers a vast array of topics with no rhyme or reason? Then check out Altered Geek Unlimited, where the topics fly more or less off the cuff. We cover media news, TV, our favorite geek products, and of course, your feedback. So get altered, get geeky with the Altered Geeks every Friday on the Geekcast Radio Network.
Because the world needs another movie podcast.
The Geekcast Radio Network presents for your listening pleasure the Cinema Geek.
Hosted by Amanda, Kevin, Matt, and Dan.
Each week we dive headfirst in the landscape of movies as we discuss movie news, play movie games,
go in-depth on reviews,
and even have a top 10 countdown or two.
Also, don't miss our director retrospective series, where we review noted directors' movies film by film. Bottom line is, if you love movies and love podcasts, you need to experience the Cinema Geeks.
You can find us on iTunes, Blog Talk Radio, or GeekCastRadio.com.
Hey, welcome to the Last Comic Shop Podcast!
A comic book podcast that actually talks about comics.
Yep, each week we open the shop up and read and discuss a comic.
Sometimes we pair that up with comic book movies or TV shows.
Or not. Lots of times it's just comic books and sound effects.
Oh, yes, definitely lots of sound effects.
So tune in on all the major podcasting platforms for the Last Comic Shop Podcast. Or check out our library of evergreen shows at www.lastcomicshoppodcast.com.
Like science fiction? Of course you do, or you wouldn't be listening to the Geekcast Radio Network. Well, the Marku 42's Universe podcast is an award-winning sci-fi radio show that's been around for over 10 years. We cover everything from Doctor Who to the MCU to pop culture and everything in between. A new show drops on Tuesday mornings on the GCRN website and all of the major podcast platforms. So listen to the Marku 42's Universe podcast from the universe and beyond.
You are receiving a transmission from the Rod Pod. Upload pending.
Stand by for soundtrack transfer.
I am Maggie.
And I am John.
And we are trapped, hurtling through space in a ship shaped like Rodimus's head.
The ship, for reasons we haven't been able to determine, contains the entire run of the IDW Transformers Phase 2 comic, which chronicle the events following the end of the war between the Autobots and Decepticons. So we figure we may as well read them all in order and report our findings to you. Stand by. Stand by.
Upload complete. Now.
The Rod Pod.
Look for us at marriedwcomics.libsyn.com, at iTunes, at Stitcher, or wherever good podcasts can be found.
So, till all are one.
Till all are one.
Till all are one.
Hi, I'm Dan, and I'm the host of the Rock Nerd Radio Show, which airs live on HudsonRiverRadio.com every Wednesday evening at 8:30 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. It also gets backed up as a podcast, which you can find on your preferred podcasting platform. Every week on my show, I talk about all kinds of pop culture. I talk about music, I talk about movies, TV, comics, collectibles, and so much more. I also feature a guest on my show periodically, which you might enjoy. I have a couple of special segments on my show, one called The Cover Song of the Week and My Favorite Thing in the World This Week. If you think this sounds cool, check it out sometime. I hope you do.
Discover a world of vintage and modern toys that's more than meets the eye with the Triple Takeover Toycast.
Hosted by toy writers and photographers Toybox Soapbox, 6O, and TF Square 1, this informal and chilled out series of discussions cover everything from vintage Transformers to Mask, Diaclone, Microman, and more, be it nostalgic or current.
Whether you're a seasoned collector or a casual robot enthusiast, all are welcome.
Triple Takeover Toycast.
On the Simplistic Reviews podcast, we talk movies. We talk TV. We talk...
Hello, Julie, what the heck are you doing?
trying to make our spots sound more exciting by adding explosions.
Yeah, I'm pretty sure you could have got the point across with sound effects, not the real thing.
Download this show on iTunes or at simplisticreviews.blogspot.com.
I'm sure your insurance company will cover that.
No, they won't.
No, they probably won't.
Houston, we have a problem.
All right, folks, we are back here inside the pull bag. Dan, where can the people find you online, your socials, all that good stuff, and tell us all about Rock Nerd Radio?
Yeah, thanks, man. Well, first off, Mike, just let me thank you for inviting me on here. This was a lot of fun. I've never been asked questions like this before, so this was very cool.
Awesome, yeah. I've been doing this show, this specific. We only revolutionized the questions back in late 2019 throughout 2020, because in 2020 my computer and all my stuff was still in storage. So all of 2020 I could not podcast, and I've been doing this for 14 years. Up until 2020, I have been recording shows every year. How my production schedule, how I like to do it was from January 1st to Halloween, so October 31st. Those 10 months, I'm going to work my ass off for whatever podcasting I need to do within those 10 months. Because usually by Halloween, you got Thanksgiving, you got Christmas, everybody kind of slows down. Everybody wants to go spend time with, nobody wants to be on a damn podcast. Like, they want to go, so right. That's how I would work. 2020 came, we moved, things ended up in storage. I ended up almost a whole year, unless other people were doing the recording for me. I did not do, 2020 is the 1 year podcasting where I'm I may have, I want to say 14 episodes, whereas in the usual 10 months out of the year, I usually end up with anywhere from 100 to 300 per year.
Oh, wow. Yeah.
Because right now, I could be wrong, but somewhere around 2018, I was around 2011 podcasts in total as of 2018. So from 2019, 2021, and now into 2022, I've added a whole lot more to that. So I'm just probably approaching 3,000 podcasts. Or I may just be over that.
That's awesome, man. Congratulations.
Thank you so much. I don't know all of the math on that. I got to get with a buddy of mine on that. But yeah, tell us all about Dan and Rock Nerd Radio.
Yeah, so the Rock Nerd Radio show, I've been on the air now for just a little bit over 11 years. I recently, a couple years ago, moved over to a new station. It's called HudsonRiverRadio.com. And the show itself will air live every Wednesday at 8:30 Eastern Standard Time, 8:30 p.m., but it is available as a podcast. So if you, any of your favorite podcasting platforms, whether it be Google, Apple, Amazon, whatever, it'll pop up on there. And then otherwise, if you're looking to follow in my somewhat day-to-day antics, I'm on Facebook, I'm on Instagram, I'm on Twitter. If you look up Rock Nerd Radio, you're going to find me on all that stuff. And the show itself, I like to talk about comics and movies and TV and music and collectibles and more. So I try to give a healthy dose of everything that I'm into in a hour time span. So.
Very cool, very cool. Tell us about your cover of the week.
So that's one of two segments on my show. One that I started from the get-go at my old station, which unfortunately closed in 2020 due to the world being what the world was. Every week I take a song and I look for a cover version of it, or I'll find a cover version of a song, and I like to highlight it every week. Sometimes they're ones that are really weird and different from what you might know the song to be. So other times it's just a straight up other artist singing the song that you know and will sound familiar to you. I've had things from all kinds of bands. I've had Green Day doing covers on there. When Weezer released Africa, that was featured. And one of the most recent ones, a band I like called Unwritten Law, did a cover of Fleetwood Mac's Little Lies. So that was one that I featured recently. And I used to be better about posting on my Facebook page what the cover song was. That's something I need to kind of get back into so people can keep track if they want to do that.
Very cool, very cool. So as of this recording, I have listened to your two most recent episodes, which is San Diego Part 1 and Part 2. And I've also gone back to the very beginning where you were talking about Rotten Tomatoes and WandaVision.
Yes.
And is it the Rotten Tomatoes episode or the WandaVision? You did one of the Seven Dust. It was when they released Blood and Stone. What's that? They will die or they will live or whatever it is. But it was Seven Dust doing a cover. And I'm like, okay, good. Because right after that, you played One Step Closer.
Yeah, was it a Seven Dust cover of a Soundgarden
that's it.
song?
Yep.
It?
Yep,
there we
that's
go.
It.
Yeah.
And after I heard that, I'm like, oh boy. So have you ever played Blackstone Cherry's covers for anything?
You know, I haven't. I'm not aware of them. So tell me about them.
I will school you after the show. But so basically, Blackstone Cherry is a southern rock band from Glasgow, Kentucky. Think of Skinner, think of Zeppelin, think of that, but like modern time.
Okay.
I don't want to they've opened Wembley for Nickelback kind of thing. They're in that kind of vein, but they do these. So far, they've done 2 volumes called Black to Blues.
Okay.
Where they take blues covers and they basically Blackstone Cherry 'em, and I have never heard such a great cover of Built for Comfort than what they did with it. Because it's a I'll share that with you off air. All right, folks, that's where you can get Dan and all his stuff running through our outro. Just to give everybody a preview here in September 2022. I'm hoping I already have next week's episode recorded, but according to the schedule, it's supposed to be TMNT Reborn Volume 1, because my buddy Joe and I have gone through all of IDW's TMNT up to issue 100, so we have from issue 1 all the way to issue 100 in any of the miniseries. The only thing we haven't done yet is Last Ronin, because it just got collected. But Reborn Volume 1 is IDW TMNT 101 to 105, I believe. And then after that, my buddy Jesse Jackson returns to the pull bag, where we talk about Tom Zoller's Long Distance and then Tom Zoller's Warning Label. And at the end of the month, we've got Bookending Origins. My buddy Dave McElvenney is going to come on, and he's going to talk about a lot of Superman in episode 496. So we are on our way to 500 episodes here inside the Pull Bag. Thank you for joining us. If you'd like to get in contact with us or leave feedback for the show, there are several ways to do so. Visit the website, geekcastradio.com, where you can listen to and comment on all of our posts. Send any email to feedback@geekcastradio.com. Here are all the ways you can listen to us nowadays. Apple and Google Podcasts. Leave us reviews, please. Spotify, which actually now Spotify does like star ratings. It's weird. They do star ratings, but they don't do review. Spotify's strange. And any other podcatcher client you choose to use. Follow us on Twitter at Geekcast Radio for the network, at The Pullbag for the show. I am at TFG and Mike. Become a fan on Facebook. Go to facebook.com/Geekcast Radio Network. You can also check out The Pullbag over there as well. For now, I am TFG and Mike with
Dan from the Rock Nerd Radio Show.
Make your great escape into comics, and we will catch you next time here inside The Pullbag.
All my work ruined! I hate Mondays!
Come here! I'm the best there is at what I do, and what I do can't be imitated, copied, cloned, or used without the express written permission of the Superhero Squad and Marvel Entertainment, LLC. Batteries not included. All rights reserved. Terms, conditions, restrictions apply. We clear, bub.
Yes, sir.
You've just heard the latest episode of The Pullbag, the GCRN's first comic review and discussion podcast. There are several ways to get in touch with us and leave feedback for the show. You can visit the website, geekcastradio.com, where you can comment on the episode and all of our different podcasts. You can rate and leave a review for the show on iTunes. Be sure to leave us feedback. Become a fan of us on Facebook, facebook.com/thepullbag. Send us an email, feedback@geekcastradio.com. Follow us on Twitter @thepullbag and @geekcastradio. So until next time, make your great escape into comics and unleash the geek in you.
Batmobile! Ignition!